So, what if the price you pay at the pump was directly connected to a future war? In this explainer, we're going to break down a pretty powerful argument that links Australia's green energy policies not just to your wallet, but to global conflicts and maybe even the very fabric of society. And right out of the gate, we get this singer. This claim really is the starting gun for the entire argument. The source uses it to frame this whole debate not around environmentalism, but around something much tougher: national power and, security. So where does this all begin? Well, it starts right at home with a pretty bold accusation. The source actually calls Australia's green energy policies a scam, and they claim these policies aren't just failing, but are actively making life harder and more expensive for everyday people. And look, according to this viewpoint, we're not talking about some distant, maybe in the future problem. The core claim here is that current policies are creating an unavoidable reality, a really painful squeeze on all of us through both higher prices and less fuel to go around. This slide really just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have the big promise of green energy: clean, sustainable, affordable. But on the other, you've got the reality as the source sees it: an expensive system that was, in their words, always going to end in tears. And just when you think this is all about your wallet, boom, the perspective takes a sharp turn. The argument moves way beyond a domestic money issue and becomes a much, much bigger question about national security and who we rely on. Because that domestic vulnerability we just talked about? Well, the argument is that it's actually creating this massive geopolitical trap. The claim is that Australia's own policies are kind of setting the stage for a disastrous showdown with its biggest trading partner, China. And it gets really specific. We're talking about a potential conflict over Taiwan. In that scenario, the claim is that Australia's military role, using its new submarines and missiles, would be to blockade the Malacca Straits, which is a super critical shipping lane. And this leads to what the source calls the Malacca Straits paradox. And wow, it is a doozy. The basic idea is that by trying to choke off China's energy supply, Australia would, at the exact same time, cut off its own lifeline for essential fuels that travel through that very same waterway. I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It highlights what the source sees as a fatal dependency. The argument is that Australia is stuck in an impossible position, getting ready for a fight with the very nation its entire economy depends on. So, we've talked about China, but the argument doesn't stop there. It zooms out, suggesting this vulnerability isn't just about one potential conflict, but is baked into this entire fragile global system that Australia is completely exposed to. And to really hammer this point home, just look at the journey Australia's fuel takes. It's not a straight line, folks. According to the source, it starts with crude oil from Russia, then it gets refined in India, shipped to Singapore, and only then does it get imported by Australia. That's a long and pretty shaky chain. And okay, this is where it gets really ironic, according to this viewpoint. The claim is that Australian foreign policy, specifically sending $1 billion in weapons to Ukraine, is now directly contributing to the destruction of the same Russian energy infrastructure that, through that whole roundabout path, actually supplies Australia. So the speaker pulls all these threads together. The core argument is that Australia is getting involved in these distant fights where it has, quote, no dog in the fight, and it's coming at a huge cost to its own national interest and security, with basically no direct benefit. After all that talk of global chaos, this quote really brings it all back home. It's not framed as wanting to be isolated, but as a call for an Australia-first kind of policy, one that's focused on making sure people here are thriving and have energy independence instead of getting tangled up in foreign conflicts. And this brings us to the final and most severe part of the argument: the fear that all these pressures, economic, geopolitical, supply chains, are all pushing Australian society itself towards a breaking point. So it really makes you ask, right? Where is that tipping point for Australia? What happens if and when we actually hit it? The fear isn't just one thing going wrong. It's a domino effect, a chain reaction. The source predicts these crises won't just be headlines. They'll poison society from the inside, fueling extremism and creating a whole generation of young people who feel like they have absolutely no future to look forward to. Which leaves us with just one last, really simple question. The source wraps it all up with this powerful proverb. It's used as a metaphor for their ultimate fear that a disenfranchised generation, left without any stake in society, won't just quietly fade away. They'll become a destructive force. And we'll leave you to think about the weight of that warning.